with autographs. That's my dad.
Another tool we use in discussing how a data set looks are the idea of quartiles or percentiles. These represent taking a collection of data down and breaking it up by percentage or into quarters. So for example, I have my data set still of my 12 test scores or 10 project scores, 12 scores. When I want to break this into groups, I might first cut it in half. Now that means that everything from the 92 up represents the upper 50th percentile, and everything from the 86 down represents my bottom 50th percentile. When I use the word percentile, I'm referring to the percentage of data above or below a given value. For example, you may have gotten your ACT scores that say you are in the top 75th percentile. That's saying that you have scored higher than 75% of the students who also took that same test. A percentile or a quartile puts you in competition with others. It's not what grade you got on your own, it's how your grade stacks up to your peers. Now, when I talk about quartiles, I'm taking my collection of data and breaking it into quarters. So for example, there's the 50th percentile mark in the middle where my median would be. And that would then further break this into quarters. So I have the top quartile, the middle quartile, the top of the bottom quartile, and then the bottom quartile. So the top 25%, the next highest 25%, the middle 25, the bottom half of the middle, and the bottom 25%. So in this case, and again, since these numbers fall in between values, I'm going to have to kind of mark them off by using that average. So the median, for example, the break point for this middle is going to be that 89 score. That would be my median. The break for this quartile is going to fall right in here between the 78 and the 75. So that's going to put me at 76 and a half. And this is going to fall right smack dab in the middle of the 100. And that would be my quartile breakdown. When I talk about a box and whiskers plot, it's a way of showing this data visually, including this breakdown. What it does is it also illustrates some information about this data quickly and easily to me. So let me make a quick sketch of this data as a box and whiskers plot. I start off with my median at 89. Then I'm going to go mark off the box, which goes up to 100. Now there's no whisker past it because my upper quartile is included at the end of that box. I'll now go the other direction. I'll mark off the 76.5 and I'll sketch out to my bottom value. And that takes me all the way back now to 10. What this box and whiskers plot shows is that I have a very solid grouping of values here at the top and a very long stretch to get to the bottom on the other end. Any data can be put onto one of these box and whisker plots by breaking it down into quartiles and illustrating those quartiles. A more common outcome might look something like this. And for this particular data set, I have a very small group here, which represents that upper quartile. This is my measure of center, my median. This shows my middle range. And again, I have a large number of data points off to the end. It's not as extreme as this first example, but it's still somewhat hefty. I may also see something that looks like this. Now in this case, I have a very long stretch from my upper quartile, a very tight one here and a longer here. So it looks like my data is not really well spread even here in my middle, and then not such a long whisker on the back of it. So again, this shows the entire range of data that I've collected, and it shows how well it's spread and where that middle is. The box of the box and whiskers is the large chunk that represents the middle of my data. Going back to my example that kicked us off, it represents this region here. That's my box. And these represent my whiskers. So again, the box and whiskers plot is a visual way of representing how this data relates to each other. It shows that spread. I use the word competition a lot because that is what this represents. It shows how the data compares to other data in that collection. It's not necessarily how that data stacks up on its own. So for example, if I were to talk about this group here, just looking at the box and whiskers on its own, I don't know any of the scores. I simply know there's a very long stretch here in the upper quartile, so that the highest grades are much higher than the bulk of the group. The middle quartiles, the middle half right here, is the majority of is half of my group, all in this one block. This represents 25% of my group, and it's very spread out, and it's very far away from that. And so again, I don't know what the scores are. All I have is how the scores relate to each other. And that's what the box and whiskers is intended to show. Traditionally, I want to see data that looks the most like this. I want something somewhat symmetrical. I want the bulk of my data to be in the box itself, and I want very small whiskers to show that my outside data points, my furthest percentiles, are not very far from the bulk of my data. It shows a nice tight clustering. That's a good collection of data that generally shows that this median is fairly indicative of a given group.